Hello, this is Sarah soiledplant and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over my philodendron collection. A few weeks ago I did post about my heartleaf philodendron collection, the vining variety, and in this video I am not going to include those, so if you'd like to see the complete collection you'll have to watch that video as well, which I will link up in the eye and then down below. But this is going to be going over every other philodendron I have, which, trust me, they're plenty. I'm going to start with this one right behind me so I don't forget. These are some cuttings of my Philodendron Gloriosum. They are lovely and they are starting to root a good amount, so they are probably ready to be potted up, as well as a lot of things I have here. I've tried not to include too many like cuttings of things, and I'll just show you one plant to kind of represent all of them, but know that I have so many cuttings of plants right now. I got my Gloriosum a long time ago. It was from one of my first videos I ever posted where I talked about importing from overseas, and this was an import. And it hasn't gotten like gigantic. Some of these are a little bit smaller. This one's on the way out, but you know, they did get a good size, but this is a crawling plant and it goes across, and I just didn't have a pot that really sustained that very well. So I decided to prop it up, cut them into pieces, try to get them rooted, and then make a fuller plant just so they're not all in a row, trying to make it a little more bushy. The leaves themselves are very soft. I wouldn't say they're like true velvet, but they do have like a nice texture to it where it's got some softness there. The vines on the front have that nice like light green, almost white, you know, very good contrast. The back is a lighter green. The veins are a little pinky purple. The stems are green and have these nice little white marks on the back. They're very subtle, so you have to look pretty closely to see them, but when the stems come in and they're brand new, they're actually a nice, like, you know, reddy orange color. And they do have a very, very slight sort of orange rim around the outside. You can kind of see it on this one a little bit. It's the easiest to see on the youngest leaves, but it is so subtle. You'd pretty much have to see it in person to get the full effect, or maybe have a better camera than what I'm using. But you can trust me, it is there. This is one of those plants that's, you know, highly sought after by collectors. Most people who are super insane about their collections will have one of these if you are into philodendron. And they're lovely. I get why they're that, you know, perfect little heart shape, and they're nice and velvety, and they do grow pretty easily. So I've been happy with it, but I need to put these propagations in some soil. They are just like going everywhere in this little thing here. So I need to get these in soil ASAP. The next one I want to show you, let's go here. This one is a newer philodendron to my collection, and this is a Dark Lord. This one I got from a local plant seller, and I haven't had any experience with this one. I know I've seen them on other people's collections and other people's channels, and they are beautiful. They do get very large if you have the right conditions for it. I had this in quarantine for a good maybe 2 months, month and a half. And I've been putting this in my greenhouse recently to try and encourage some of that growth. We will see what it does to the leaves, but it's called Dark Lord because it is so unbelievably dark. It is, obviously it's still green. It's not true black, but it is a lovely color, and the backs are a nice burgundy maroonish color, very, very dark. Now, on the older ones, they do lighten up a little bit, or maybe this one wasn't given good light. I don't know. This is the only leaf that's grown in my care so far, and I've got another itty bitty one on the way, so we will see how it goes. This needs a little bit of water. So yeah, I don't have a ton of information about this plant aside from it's stunning when it's full grown, and it's got beautiful, beautiful dark stems, and clearly they stay dark, which is a nice touch. I had some trouble with my Philodendron Black Cardinal. It just wouldn't grow correctly, and it was lightening up constantly no matter what lighting conditions I was giving it. And I did end up giving that plant away because it was frustrating me. And sometimes when plants frustrate you and they're fairly easy to get a hold of, you know, it's just like, I had to get rid of it. This is my first foray back into dark philodendrons, so we're gonna try again. I think it'll be all right. So far, so good. It hasn't grown all wonky, and my leaves haven't come out all wrinkly yet. So let's see how it goes, but that is my Dark Lord. Sticking on the darker side of things, I have a cutting of a Philodendron Majesty. I believe it's Majesty, but this is another one that is a little bit darker. It's not quite as dark as my Philodendron Dark Lord, but it is darker than a standard medium color philodendron. Putting these up next to each other, it's a little bit darker, and I do believe this one's lightened up a bit, you know, it's a little bit older. So while it's not the darkest plant in the world, it is on the darker side. It definitely has the nice, almost black, very dark brown stems on it, and my cutting has some healthy roots on it. I should plant it up. That's a theme. It is almost spring. Like, I know date-wise it's spring, but it snowed today and yesterday, so I'm not gonna plant things up quite yet. I want to be like true spring before I plant them up, if I can help it. I've got new growth coming, so I'm excited to see what that does. You know, I'm putting it right next to one of my grow lights that I have on my banquet on that side of the room. So it's getting decent light. I still technically have it in like a quarantine spot, but there's nothing else over there, so it just kind of sits there by itself and it hangs. But I'm looking forward to seeing what this one does, because the starting leaf is so huge. I'm just like, I want bigger plants. I love my little plants, but I want a few that are just like very substantial, and I'm hoping that's what this turns into. The next one I'll bring up is my Philodendron Giganteum. You wouldn't know by looking at it, but it is supposed to get really, really big. I do have this in a western facing window, so I keep hoping upon hope that this will get bigger. I might put it in my south facing window at some point. And clearly this one isn't doing so good. I've had a lot of struggles getting this thing to have more than 2 leaves on it at a time. For a brief moment in time a little bit ago, this had 3 leaves on it, but I did recently lose that extra leaf. So now these are the only 2 I have left, and one is already not looking so good. But I did pot this up hoping it would do better. It's got a nice healthy root system on it. Like, it is very, very happy for sure. I just need those leaves to be bigger. I need you to grow. They have not grown in size, and I've had this for at least a year, like probably more than that, but it hasn't gotten bigger yet. But these, if you do give them the right conditions, they get gigantic. And part of me is thinking if these can handle direct sun, I'd probably put it outside this summer. We'll see. We'll see how it does. I do like how it bounces though. That is very amusing. I'm like a child. These aren't the most interesting plants to write home about, at least when they're in this sort of younger stage. The thing that they're known for is that they do get really big. But right now it almost looks like a syngonium, almost. It's got the little arrowhead shape, little green stems. They are green, green, green. We'll see if they get bigger. I'm gonna keep trying with it. It's not causing me any problems, so I'll keep it, but I want it to get bigger. The next one I'm going to show you is my Philodendron Fuzzy Petiole, and I have this in a little bag cloche, and I also keep this in my greenhouse so it gets good light and extra humidity. It's got good water, just checking on it. But I have this in moss, and this is a plant that I got off of Facebook Marketplace, and this is the leaf it came with. It sprouted this other like little tiny leaf, and it's got another one on the way that looks a little bit bigger than the last one, not quite as big as the one it came with, so I'll take it. When I saw this posted on Facebook, I had not actually heard of these, and I had to look them up, and they're not especially rare. You can get them for a fairly good price. I think I got this cutting for like $15, which might seem like a lot to some of you, which is very reasonable. But because I never heard of it, and I'm a sucker for a fun petiole, as you'll see with some of these, you know, I was very much looking forward to this. But after I looked it up and found out that it was like, you know, fairly common, it's even more common in Europe. So who knew? So I was very happy to add this to my collection, but it's still fairly small. No fuzzy petioles quite yet, but I'm sure they'll come as it matures. Since we're talking about fuzzy petioles, might as well go with the queen of fuzzy petioles herself, which is the Philodendron verrucosum. Trust me, I'm aware that there are others like the serpens that have way more petiole fuzziness than these do, but this one is probably the most recognizable of the fuzzy petiole variety. Now, verrucosums are beautiful. I have heard so many horror stories about caring for them, and I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with them. They do get bugs very easily. I treat this a lot, and I have it in my cabinet to keep the humidity up. This one definitely prefers more humidity, and these stems are so fragile. I have had plants just completely snap on me. Even if they are, you know, adhered to a pole, I've had them snap on me probably twice, I think. And considering I haven't had these for super long, you know, maybe 2 years, this was also in that international order that I did many years ago. But yeah, in here I do have a couple of plants that I kind of took cuttings of as it got really tall. This is definitely a grow up the tree variety. And look at how beautiful these leaves are. They've got that lovely dark pattern to them. Here, I'll show you one over here. Like, look at that. There's a reason these are popular. That is insane to me. So unbelievably gorgeous. And not only that, they have fuzzy petioles. You can see how fuzzy that is. This one down here also has a very nice fuzzy petiole to it. And you get more kind of as it matures. Some of the really little leaves, like this one down here, doesn't have any fuzziness to it. And you know, it kind of just goes through plant puberty and starts growing hair like the rest of us. I've also got another little plant growing over here, and I've got another leaf coming, and that's gonna be so pretty. I can't wait. I've got one up here that already has like that nice coloring to it, and I can tell it's gonna be just a beautiful, beautiful plant. But I will say I have had the best luck with this plant basically being in my humidity cabinet and treating this for bugs. My beneficial insects that I have, I make sure there's plenty in my high humidity cabinets so that plants like this will do okay. And I haven't seen any bugs on this recently, like knock on all the wood, like I haven't seen bugs on this in a minute, and that's part of the reason why it's doing so well. And I'm very happy with it. I know that these can really be a struggle for some people. So if you want something like this that has some of the attributes of this, but is much easier to care for, I would recommend this next plant I'm going to show you, which is the Philodendron Splendid. This is a cross between verrucosum and melanochrysum. But yes, this is another plant that desperately needs to go in soil. It has got roots for days in there, and I need to put this in a pot soon. But this grew like crazy. I have the main pot of it also in my cabinet, but I basically cut the whole thing back. It grew like a weed. I had it in my high humidity cabinet, but I really think that this one would do okay even without like 70% humidity. I think that these are just so much easier to care for. I found the melanochrysum really hard to care for, and I know a lot of people struggle with verrucosum. I have to some degree. This one is easier than both of them combined. I don't know how science does it, but this plant is amazing. They're also coming down in price. I think when I bought my plant, it was like $250, something insane. And I think you can get like a one leaf cutting for less than $100 now. So I do think that these are coming down in price, probably because they're so easy to propagate. And I love them. I'm gonna put this in a nice pot. I wanna have a beautiful array of plants, and I wanna put these on a pole. These do grow up trees in the wild, much like the melanochrysum and the verrucosum. This one is no different. I've got this leaf about to unfurl, and you know how tempting it is not to just pull that off and help it unsheath? It is so tempting to not do that, but I'm not going to. I am going to be a good plant parent and not touch it. I'm gonna let the plant do its own thing because clearly it knows what it's doing. I will say, as far as looks go, it definitely has a little bit more melanochrysum to it. I'm trying to remember how dark melanochrysum is. I feel like this is darker, but my memory might be just wonky. But the part that I love about it from the verrucosum is the backs of the leaves have that lovely, lovely reddy brown verrucosum look to it. And it does have a little bit of like sheen to it, but there is so much depth and richness to this plant. I love the vines on it, how it almost looks like electricity coming off of it. It's just, I love this plant so much. If I had to pick a philodendron just for looks alone, I think this one's my favorite. It's hard to kind of choose because I love them all so much, but I think this one is my favorite. The next two I'm going to actually show you together because they are very similar. This one is the Philodendron White Princess, and this is a Philodendron White Knight. I'll start with the White Princess. This is a plant that is basically the same as the Pink Princess, but this one comes in white. Now you can get some variegation in a White Princess where it will throw pink, and supposedly the mother plant from this cutting did throw pink, which is why she was cutting back some of the white pieces. I'm not necessarily looking for that, but those are desirable to have a White Princess that does throw pink. It kind of has like a Syngonium tricolor vibe to it where you have pink and white on green, which is highly desirable. But this is a White Princess. Now, the reason you can tell this is a White Princess versus a White Knight is this one has pink on that very edge right here. It's hard to tell. I know there's a name for that. The name is escaping me, whereas on the White Knight, that same part is white. There's also a white wizard, but that's a completely different plant. It is still technically on my list, but considering I have two of the alternatives in this sort of trifecta of white on philodendron, I might not end up getting it, but it was on my list for a very long time, and I ended up picking up these. But yeah, as you can see, this is a very low variegation white knight. I got a decent deal on it, or at least I thought it was a decent deal. And I've got this in my grow cabinet, hoping that it'll throw some more white. This very recent leaf is kind of hard to tell. There's like small amounts, but really not much to speak of. It's also a lot smaller, but it's been moving environments quite a bit. But I have recently put this in my grow cabinet. If they all ended up kind of like this, which is fairly low variegation, I would be pretty happy. I just got a good deal on it and I kind of wanted to try them out. Typically this type of growth pattern, I'm not very good at. For some reason, this type of growth pattern on philodendrons and I just do not get along, these sort of cluster varieties, but I wanted to try it again. And of course I'm trying it with one that's, insanely expensive to replace, but I wanted to have some fun with it. And I think this is a really cool plant. One thing to note is not only is there sort of that white edging, the stem itself is kind of a burgundy brown color. The white wizard, which I do not have, has green with none of the sort of coloring on it, and the white princess is green, but it does have variegation on the stem. So that is one thing that separates this from my white knight. But these are both fairly new to my collection. Obviously this is just a little cutting and it has not produced a second leaf yet. There is a good amount of roots. I can see them in there and they are fuzzy and beautiful. So it's only a matter of time and I'll probably get some little stumpy leaf off of this before it starts, becoming a real plant. But I'm working on them. These are kind of little project plants and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to them. The next one I'm going to show you is my Philodendron Florida Ghost. This one I bought a little while ago. For some reason, this one hadn't appealed to me for a long time, but for some reason recently these have really kind of struck a chord with me and I decided to go out and get one. I'll show you the oldest leaf on this, which has all turned green, but that is sort of what a juvenile form looks like. The very, very young baby ones don't even have these types of ears. But sort of as they mature, they kind of make this more star pattern. Now, the thing about Florida ghosts is when they come out and unsheath, they are usually white if they are given the right lighting conditions. And if they don't, they kind of come out with this sort of like speckled, minty variety. There is no such thing as a mint Florida ghost. Don't buy into the hype. It literally just means it's a Florida ghost that's not getting enough light. And clearly mine is not either, because this is the most recent leaf that came out. And while it was lighter when it came out and it is darkened a little bit, it was not white and it was always kind of the speckly color. So I definitely need to put this in an area with a little bit more light. I actually think after this video's over, I am actually going to put this in a new spot to see how it does. I've got it right next to grow lights, like right next to grow lights, and it is not doing any better. And it's been there a hot minute, so it should have improved by now if it was going to improve. So I think I'm going to put this in a new window. The other thing about this plant that I'm not a huge fan of is it's been throwing floral nectaries constantly. I have been consistently treating this for bugs, and no matter what I do, I get floral nectaries. I don't know how to really stop that. I haven't done a ton of research on how to stop it. I've tried cleaning it, but it is so sticky. It is just like if you got maple syrup between your fingers, that is what this stuff is. So I try not to touch it too much, and it attracts cat hair like nobody's business. It is constantly covered in stuff because it just sticks to the floral nectary, and I don't know how to get rid of that. I've also heard that the price of these are coming down as well, so if this is a plant you're interested in, and maybe I just got a floral nectary covered variety and normally that's not an issue for this plant and that's just a me problem, but if you're interested in one of these, apparently they are coming down in price, so you should check them out. But that is the Philodendron Florida Ghost. The next one I'm going to show you is a Philodendron atabapoense. I do have one that is on a pole, and I've got several cuttings of this, but this is one where I put the cuttings into a pot and planted it up already, and I thought it was nice and compact, so I would show you how a Philodendron atabapoense looks. So ignore kind of the discoloration. This poor plant, this leaf has been producing roots and producing new plants, so it's gone through the ringer. The backsides are a beautiful reddy brown, just so deep. The ones down here coming out very green, but those are little itty bitty baby atabapoenses. When the plant is a little bit more mature and it's unsheathing new leaves, they are actually hot pink and they are the most beautiful color you can imagine. I don't have any other philodendron that when they come out, they are that type of luminescent highlighter pink, and it is the cutest thing I've ever seen. And then they do darken up to sort of a deeper medium green and then purple backsides. I have had this plant for a good long while, taken several cuttings of it. It grows like no tomorrow. Like, I honestly think it would take serious neglect to kill one of these. These are so resilient. I do think they ship well also because the leaves are so thick, they're almost like a leather belt. Like, obviously they're thinner than a belt, but they are tough and it can handle a good amount of abuse. So if you're somebody who is afraid of more expensive plants and you want to try one and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it survive, this one will definitely survive. It's done nothing but grow for me. It roots really easily in water when I take cuttings. I've never had a water propagation fail on me, and I've had this for 2 years now. Taken several cuttings, sold cuttings, put them into plants, sold the plants, given them away to friends. They reproduce like crazy. So this might be a good option if you're somebody who kills plants and you like the look of it. So that's the Philodendron atabapoense. The next plant I'm going to show you is going to take the entire frame up. So let me back up a smidge. This is my Philodendron biliatiae. This one is similar to the atabapoense in that they have long belt-like leaves. You know, this leaf right here, I believe, yeah, no, that's not the newest one. This one right here, this is the newest leaf. And that is at least a foot long, probably a foot and a half if you're including the lobes. And I love this plant so much. It is one of these resilient plants. It has grown like crazy since I've gotten it. I think when I bought it, it had 4 leaves, and I know I lost one of those leaves at some point, and now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now this thing has 9 leaves. So if that gives you any indication of how quickly these grow, it is like a weed. I've got this in the middle of my console table with 2 grow lights on either side. So it doesn't get the best light. It probably gets the worst light on the table, but it's thriving and it loves it. I don't know if you can tell, but the internodal spacing on this is so tight, and I promise I have done nothing to earn such a tight internodal spacing. So I honestly believe that this plant is just amazing. I will say, as you can probably tell, this plant takes up so much room. So keep that in mind if this is a plant you want. It takes up a lot of real estate and loves to cannibalize light from other plants, so keep that in mind. To be fair, I could probably make this plant grow more vertically if I gave it a light above it as opposed to on either side, so that might be some cause for this, but I would imagine that that is fairly common for this plant, that it just kind of sprawls out and kind of does its thing. So aside from this being very reliable for me and being pretty much no hassle, I have underwatered this plant a handful of times and it handles it pretty well. I haven't had, you know, a ton of pushback from it. Like, granted, you might lose leaves on the bottom. This one is sort of on the way out. It is the oldest one that still remains in the pot, so this one's kind of, you can't really tell on camera maybe, but you can tell like the edges are getting yellow. So it's on the way out, but I'm gonna leave it alone and let it do its thing. But yeah, generally speaking, this has been a great plant. Now, this is another one that out of nowhere started developing floral nectaries, not nearly to the magnitude as some of the other plants. And this one is much easier to clean off because the stems are very smooth and very thick. I can definitely get like an alcohol on a wipe and just clean these much easier than I can for some of the other ones. Because the other one, the stems are way too delicate and it's hard, or they're fuzzy or have a texture on them, and these are very smooth, so they're easy to clean off, but they just come right back. So I've left it alone for the most part. Also, this one is heavily treated for bugs and it seems fine. It doesn't seem to be, you know, reacting negatively as if it has bugs, but it is getting floral nectaries. So that is one downside I've had to this plant, but otherwise this thing is a stellar plant, superstar, and one of my biggest plants, and I love her. Oh, I almost forgot. Obviously you can probably tell, but the stems are a nice orange color. The backs of the leaves are still green, so there's nothing to note there. So if you're looking for a bilietiae, you're in it for the super long leaves and quick growth, because these leaves get huge, and this is a super satisfying plant to grow because I'm doing so little for this thing and it's just happy to be here. So I love this plant. It's a good one. This spindly bad boy is my Philodendron 69686. Someday this plant will have an actual name and not a set of numbers, but for the moment, that is what this plant is called. This is one that also grows very easily. Now, it's not the cutest every time it grows. I've noticed that since I've taken this out of my old humidity tent that I used to have, I had a tent in my old apartment, but since I've moved to my new house, I haven't reset that up. So I didn't have quite enough space to put this in my humidity IKEA cabinets because, you know, takes up a lot of vertical space and I wanted other things in there rather than this one. But this plant grows like a weed. No matter what I do, it seems to keep growing. It is a very, very happy plant. So this one is unique because of the shape of the leaves. It is kind of like a poor man's Eye, and the Eye has the same kind of shape to it, but it has little ripples along here. But honestly, I love the Y shape. I was so excited when I got this plant. It is very much a unique shape of philodendron, and I'm happy to have it. It has been causing me a little bit of problems though, because this one, like all the others, have floral nectary issues, and this one has them so bad that it actually damages the leaf a little bit. It causes kind of spots on it, and it has been causing me problems. The other thing that I'm not a super fan of this plant is kind of the awkward growth pattern. Now, the ones down here that have tighter internodal spacing, that is when I had it in the humidity tent, but now I've got internodal spacing that is closer to like 4 inches apart, maybe 5 inches apart. Not a super fan of that because that makes it even more gangly than it already is. Granted, I have taken cuttings of this and it does very well. I have heard that these ship like absolute garbage. So if you were interested in a plant like this, I would highly suggest you find it locally or find somebody willing to give you a cutting who's local, because holy cow, these things just die back immediately. I actually bought this plant from the Rare Plant Fairy because she is actually local to me. I could drive down and pick this up. So that is how I ended up getting my hands on one. But this thing, when she gave it to me, I think it was 3 leaves and it was considered a small plant. And it grew like a weed, man. This thing just like could not stop growing. It's got a good amount of leaves on it now, but I've taken a handful of cuttings from this over the year and it's been fantastic. It grows well. I love the shape of it. The only drawback is how spindly it's growing and all of the floral nectaries actually damaging the leaf. It's not like the other ones where, you know, it's annoying and it gets sticky, but it doesn't damage the leaves. It usually is just on the stems, whereas this one, it gets on the leaves as well as the stems. And that is really unfortunate because otherwise this plant would probably be like a 9 out of 10 without those floral nectaries causing issues. But for me, I have them, so it kind of gets docked a few points for that. But I do love this plant. I'm very grateful to have it, and I will continue taking cuttings from it and hopefully getting it to stop growing so silly. So that is my goal. But that is a Philodendron 69686. Like, look at that T-shape. How, like, what other plant can you get besides the Eye that has that shape? It's so unique. I love it. Now for the last plant, I'm gonna actually have to pause the video and go grab it because she is gigantic. All right, I backed you up a little bit. So this is the next plant, which is my Philodendron Plumini Eye. I was so nervous moving this thing because I have not moved it since I put it on my shelf in this house, which was probably like 6 months ago. But this here is my gigantic Philodendron Plumini Eye. I'm actually gonna lower my camera down so you can see the entire plant in all its glory. I don't want to move it too much because I'm afraid one of these stems is going to snap. But this is a crawling plant. It is similar to a mame. It looks like a pastazanum. Very much a big, broad, you know, big round lobe heartleaf plant. This is a crawler. It has big vines that grow along the ground. And this one I've taken also a handful of cuttings from. It's a fantastic plant, and for me, this plant grows like insane. This, like, clearly you can tell that this plant grows like crazy. I do get spider mites on this plant a good amount, more than I would care to admit. I've treated it with my, beneficial insects, and it seems to be doing okay. It's keeping them at bay, at least for now. Now, I will try to show you some close-up footage of the petioles on this plant because they are so unique. It's got the same kind of little dashes that the Gloriosum has, but I think they're a lot more concentrated on the Plumini Eye. The other thing about the Plumini Eye is it has these beautiful little ruffles along the sort of edge of the petiole that are just to die for. They just look so pretty, so lovely. It adds a nice dimension to the plant. The other thing I will say about this plant, I lost a ton of leaves after I moved because it got spider mites, and I lost probably 50% of the leaves on this. And since I was treating it, and most of these leaves came out in the winter time, so when I say this plant does not need a ton of light, it is so far from a window. It is like there's a little corner window, and this is on the opposite side of the room. It's like 10 feet away from a window, and it is thriving. I honestly don't know what I did to deserve this plant. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It is one of my pride and joy plants. Like I said, the Splendid's my favorite. This one's my favorite. Granted, if the Splendid was as big as this one and grew with reckless abandon the way this one does, it might win out. Obviously, I know that if all of my plants were this big, I'd have to get rid of half, maybe 2/3 of my collection, but it would be worth it because look at this thing. I won't be able to show you because this thing, I am not moving it more than I have to, but there are two big long crawling sections that have kind of come out of the pot. And this one right here is the newest growth, which is a little bit smaller than, or it's about the same size as this one, but it's brand new, and look at how pretty she is. Look at how pretty she is. That is just absolutely gorgeous. The other thing about the Plumini Eye to note is that it does have like a sort of gray whisper on the front of the leaf that is just lovely. And as it matures, it does actually lose that. But this obviously is like, I don't know, a juvenile, a 21-year-old. I don't know how to, describe this, but it still has a little bit of that sort of gray. I think that goes all the way away as it grows up. Maybe that's the mame. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that as this one sort of grows up, it loses that lovely sort of gray streaks on the front. And when I tell you those gray streaks are just lovely, but there's so much life and dimension in these leaves. It is just the most stunning plant. When I originally bought this, it was from a local shop that happened to do a trip to Florida, and it was $80. $80. And this thing was fairly big. It was in a 10-inch pot when I bought it. Granted, it's a lot bigger now, but this thing is insane. This Plumini Eye is insane. I've actually sold little pieces off of this, not very many, because honestly, I'm afraid that the second I sell pieces of this, the whole thing's gonna die. So I've only sold one of my little pots of it, and that one little pot that I sold was the same as what I paid for the initial plant. So this one has already paid for itself, so that's a good thing. That's the beauty of plants, that if you're worried about the investment, take a few cuttings, and the few cuttings you take will cover the cost of your entire plant. So that is one good thing. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Comment down below which of my philodendron are your favorites. Is there anything that I have that you've always wanted to try and you have questions about it? I'll answer the best to my knowledge, of course. I'm no plant expert. I am just a massive collector and someone with a major plant problem that decided to buy so many different types of plants. So I will answer the best of my abilities. Let me know what other philodendron you would recommend based on the plants that I have. And if you want to see the rest of my heartleaf philodendrons of the vining kind, I do have that video linked down in the description for you in case you want to see the entire complete collection. Then those will be included as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Bye!